What is going on, guys? Decoding here, and today we are going to check out Decoding Fox News. I already forgot her name. I've been listening to this podcast for a couple years now, and this woman is unbelievable. All she does basically all day is listen to Fox News and goes over and fact checks them, because most media will not. And it's kind of mind-boggling to me that she hasn't had like multiple aneurysms or strokes from having to listen to this. So what she typically does is she will take 16 hours and basically break it down into segments and then talk about how they are wrong, cites the sources, all that sort of thing. So we're going to jump into this. And I am going to do some tanking. I'm going to do some Rick crafting. I'm probably going to do some other odds and ends that I need to get done in the game. And yeah, hopefully you enjoy.
Episode 132 of Decoding Fox News, and I'm your host, Juliet Jeske. Each week, I watch and analyze a whole heck of a lot of Fox News and then break it down. This past week, it was 16 hours of Fox News. I watch all the Fox News you'd never want to. Let's get into it. How dare you call our divine leader a fascist?
I say to the people of New York, with crime at record levels, with terrorists and criminals pouring in, and with inflation eating your hearts out, turn it around very quickly. With 4 more years of Kamala Harris, New York State will be like a third world nation if it isn't already. It is. I think it is. But my parents would drop me off at a subway, and I'd go to Union Turnpike, or I'd go to wherever They had no fear that I was going to be disappearing. They would take me to a subway, put me on and say, bye, darling, bye. If you do that today, you have about a 75% chance that you'll never see your child again. A vote for Kamala Harris is a vote for 4 more years of job losses. Look at what's happening. Businesses that are fleeing, money draining out of your state, and hundreds of thousands of illegal migrants sucking your public resources dry. Your prices down, all they're doing is they've cut it, but you're up 55 or 60%. People that used to live a nice life 4 years ago, they can't afford an apple. A woman, they showed a picture of a woman the other day. I said, boy, that's sad. That should never happen to her. She went to the counter, the cashier, she had 3 apples. And when she was standing with the cashier, she realized she didn't have enough money for one of the apples, and she took the apple, brought it back, and she bought 2 apples. That shouldn't be happening in our country. 21 million people, many come out of jails and prisons, slight difference between one being a little bit more harsh. They come out of mental institutions and insane asylums. They come out of terrorist schools. They come literally out of schools, but they're terrorists. We have people coming from gangs, the worst gangs in the world, MS-13, considered the meanest gang. They cut people up. They don't want to use guns. Mm-hmm. We have to win this election to save our country. If we don't win this election, I really believe our country is either finished or very close to it, because we have to turn it. And if we don't turn it and turn it now, it's going to be too late to turn it later. I really believe that.
So every word, every pause, every syllable of what you just heard was broadcast on Fox News. Most of it occurred during the Ingram angle, when Fox decided to show roughly 30 minutes of a rally that Trump held in Uniondale, New York, which is Long Island, which is like a suburban area outside of New York City. And Long Island is a patchwork of blue and red. he's in a red area, like yay, rah, rah. Okay, completely pointless for him, by the way, to spend money in an area that he has no hope of winning. It'd be like going to Illinois or Maryland. Like, yay, good luck with that. Or Hawaii. I'm going to like California. He's already gone to California because he thinks California could be in play because he's delusional. But I played that clip to show how heightened his rhetoric was. I went through the entire episode of Gutfeld where he appeared and the entire 32 minutes or whatever of the rally and rewatched it with a fine-tooth comb looking for areas where I could cut because I wanted to show that he hasn't tamped down his rhetoric at all. He's still all the way out there. That Apple story is ridiculous. Nobody believes it because no old lady would be like, hey, I want to go to the grocery store and buy 3 apples because it takes effort to go to the grocery store. It might even take money, depending on where this woman lives. If she has to get in a car, she's spending money to go to the store and buy 3 apples, which I don't know what that would cost because I couldn't find a price on apples. Everything's by the pound. And then, oh, lo and behold, she can only buy 2. He's painting this picture that we're like in the middle of the Great Depression when we're actually doing incredibly well globally, especially compared to other economies. We're like rocket ship to the moon in many ways. And he acts like we're on the brink. Another little tiny detail that just made me just yell at him, as I want to do, was Union Turnpike. He sort of got that right, but not really. That was the subway station he claimed his parents dropped him off at, Union Turnpike. It is called Kew Gardens Union Turnpike, and I know this because I used to live in Kew Gardens. Not for very long, but I did, sort of in between apartments. I stayed with a friend in Kew Gardens, and what New Yorkers do is we abbreviate everything because it's long. So you have, for instance, 14th Street Union Square, everybody calls Union Square. That's a subway stop. Herald Square, it's 34th Street, Herald Square. Nobody calls it Herald, that huge long name. They just say 34th Street. Boom. Kew Gardens is just called Kew Gardens. It's not called Kew Gardens Union Turnpike. Jackson Heights, there's another one. It's like at whatever. It's got a second name to it. Everybody just calls it Jackson Heights. Anyway, I'm just stop. That man probably hasn't ridden a subway in, I would say, 70 years. I would. And he just proved it. We're not at Bedlam. He lied about crime in New York. He lied about everything in New York. I'm just so tired of it. So last night I was really struggling with my lead for this episode, as it were, for the newsletter and the podcast. Wasn't happy with it. Tried to fall asleep. Woke up, went, this is my idea, and wrote it down. Here we go. Life during the Trump era is like being trapped in a Netflix sci-fi series where a spoiled brat gets to dictate how everyone around him lives. If he declares himself the ruler of the universe, no one can challenge him, while Fox News cheers him on. If the bratty youth dines with white nationalists and anti-Semites at his garish estate, we are not allowed to get upset by it. If he declares that impoverished migrants are vermin poisoning our country, we cannot criticize him. Every statement the tiny terror makes must be broken down and pored over in ways that make him look benevolent and brilliant. He really didn't tell people to ingest disinfectant or defend neo-Nazis. We just didn't understand him the first time or the 20th. If he praises dictators, we've simply misunderstood his very stable genius. If we ask for evidence that countries are forcing prisoners and mental patients to illegally immigrate into the United States, we must be part of the conspiracy to undermine this country. If we call the wannabe tyrant a madman, we are somehow fueling another unhinged loner with a gun in a country that has more firearms than people and more mass shootings than days on the calendar. Nothing is ever Trump's fault. He can demonize entire groups of people, make up outrageous stats, invent histories that do not exist, then claim he is the victim if we challenge him on a single detail. If we speak out against him, we are the enemy of the people, fake news, liars, hoaxsters, and cheats. Fox News promoted the premise that Trump was the target of a second thwarted assassination attempt because everyone from never Trump Republicans to progressive leftists, have compared him to the despots he openly admires. The only remedy Fox News hosts could come up with to prevent another attempt on Trump's life was for the rest of us to shut up while he called his critics evil monsters hell-bent on starting World War III. The network also decided to pivot from constantly trashing Vice President Kamala Harris to praising and featuring everything it possibly could about former President Donald J. Trump. Laura Ingraham sacrificed 32 minutes of the Ingraham Angle for a live feed from Trump's rally in Uniondale, New York. Greg Gutfeld invited the former president on as a guest, where Donald J. Trump sat on a panel next to a former professional wrestler. The network also continued to add fuel to false rumors about Haitian immigrants while it distorted promising economic data for the U.S. economy. Anyone watching Fox News exclusively last week would have missed out on stories of climate disasters in 2 continents, a Republican rejection of a bill that would have protected IVF access, and 2 deaths caused by restrictive abortion laws in Georgia. Shows I covered last week on Fox: Fox and Friends, The Five, The Ingraham Angle, and the 1 episode of Gutfeld! To catch Trump's appearance. So I have another example of Trump not, doing what he says he wants others to do. This is from Wednesday, again, that rally in Uniondale, New York. He's scolding his critics for using heated language, and then he attacks the entire press pool.
Let me also deliver a message straight to Kamala Harris, the radical left Democrat politicians, and the fake news media. Look how many are there. We've got to get our media back in this country. We've got to get them back. But the message is it's time to stop the lies, stop the hoaxes, stop the smears, stop the lawfare or the fake lawsuits against me, and stop claiming your opponents will turn America into a dictatorship. Give me a break. Because the fact is that I'm not a threat to democracy, they are.
So I just want to point out that when he mentioned the press, he stopped and pointed directly at them. And then surrounding him, people completely behind him and all sides of him, immediately started shaking fists, booing, pointing their thumbs down, angrily screaming at the press corps. The Nassau Coliseum holds about 16,000 people. Trump has lied, claimed that there was like a much larger group of people there, but that's what it holds. So imagine being a member of the press, and let's just give him a full house. I don't know. I've read conflicting reports on that. So let's just give him a full house. Your job is to cover this lunatic, and he turns the entire crowd against you. And you're just sitting there with your recording device, maybe a camera. That's it. That's all you've got. Your goal is to get a story out of this, to record it, to inform the public, because that's what journalists do. And that monster, and I am not holding back on my rhetoric, just sicked 16,000 people and basically called you fake, phony, and the enemy of the people, which he has used that exact terminology. It is impossible for us to silence ourselves, to mute ourselves, to put a muzzle on our words, to protect him when he's the one inciting the violence. January 6th happened, and I'm not going to ignore it because it is inconvenient for someone who creates his own reality. This man is twisted, sick, depraved, and dangerous, and I'm not going to hold back, and none of us should. Because it won't matter, because he doesn't follow his own rules. He just wants to dictate everyone else's reality. And I am very thankful to the universe that he was unharmed. And that would-be assassin was taken out, even though he was also not harmed. But he did not succeed in harming anyone, including Trump. I cannot stand Trump. but he needs to face a jury of his peers in various cases. He should not be harmed. We should never get to a point that someone with a gun decides who our leader is. Never. I don't care who the person is. We should never get to that point. So yes, I'm thankful, but he's part of the problem. And this twisting of reality that Fox and the right-wing media and Trump does to constantly make excuses for him and to blame everybody else. He's the one that's raised the temperature in this country since 2015. We had problems before that. We've always had problems. We will always have problems. We've been polarized for decades, in my humble opinion, but he made it so much worse. So here's another example of how Fox is making it worse. So last week, a second man attempted to assassinate Donald J. Trump while he golfed at one of his clubs in West Palm Beach, Florida. Ryan Wesley Routh didn't fire his weapon, and Trump was never in his line of sight, but an eagle-eyed Secret Service agent managed to spot his rifle through a fence and take a shot at him, scaring him off. The would-be assassin was later captured by police after a bystander turned in his information to law enforcement after noticing his suspicious behavior. On the shows I covered last week, the second attempt on the former president's life took up nearly a third of the network's airtime. Fox News host blamed the attack on the harsh criticism Trump has faced for his inflammatory statements. Just as Fox News admonished critics of the former president for using dangerous rhetoric, some hosts on the network used language that implied that the attempts on Trump's life were part of a collective movement. So this is the first one is from Tuesday, while a guest on the Ingram Angle. This is Judge Jeanine Pirro using the pronoun they, which is normally used for plural or a group, because there's no indication that this shooter used they as his pronoun. So here we go.
It's almost as though this man they just tried to kill him for a second time. It's almost as though she won't be happy until there's a bounty on Donald Trump's head.
So both the shooter in Butler, Pennsylvania, and the gunman in Florida acted alone. There's no evidence that either men were part of a larger movement or received any outside support. There's also nothing to support Pirro's insinuation that Vice President Kamala Harris is seeking harm against the former president. Even Trump acknowledged during his rally in Uniondale, New York, that both Harris and Biden immediately reached out to him, offering their support after both attacks. So the same day as the clip I just played for you, on the 5, Greg Gutfeld made this comment that inferred that the violent acts directed against Trump were somehow part of the progressive movement.
I must glue myself to the freeway. I must splatter paint on art. I must threaten to kill the president. It's as though they've taken the idea of no ethical restraint and applied it to larger ideas. I see Hitler everywhere, therefore I can kill Hitler.
This next clip is the most subtle, but it's Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House, and he is on the Ingram Angle. This is from Wednesday. His first use, he uses they again to describe what I believe is the first shooter. His statement's a little confused.
They came within a half inch of killing him, and had the agent not found the sniper, he might well have killed him. So
Now, this next one is a classic because you normally would hear this language out of one of the liberals on the 5, but this time it was Steve Doocy goes rogue, where our eccentric boomer kind of goes off the skids and starts just speaking out of turn on Fox. Is he told to do this? Does he do this on his own? Nobody knows. But here we go. This is from Monday. This was right after the news broke, and I knew that Fox would be singularly obsessed with this second incredibly unsuccessful assassination attempt on Donald J. Trump. I knew that they would be. And of course, they did not disappoint. That's the first story they started with, and they just kept going back to it in the first hour of Fox and Friends. But here's Steve Doocy dropping some truth bombs on his co-hosts.
Resume. Well, we do know a little bit about the suspect's politics. He was a Trump supporter in 2016, according to X, but turned against Trump by 2020. Records are that he voted in the North Carolina primary. He contributed up to about $150 that is known of to Act Blue, which is a Democratic, like a super PAC. And during this current election cycle, he actually backed a ticket involving Vivek Ramaswamy and Nikki Haley. When Vivek dropped out on X, he said, "You cannot quit. You must stay on the ballot to the end. Join Nikki and keep working. Never give up." So his politics are curious, and maybe in the next day or so, we'll learn more about him.
So his dream ticket of Vivek Ramaswamy and Nikki Haley is humorous for a number of reasons. Mainly because they hated each other, like openly hated each other. Vivek Ramaswamy, for some bizarro reason, decided his job in the primary was to attack Nikki Haley. And it didn't work at all. Like, it didn't work at all. And she would just fight back. I would also say that Vivek Ramaswamy, in some ways, had the most radical policy beliefs out of the gamut of people who ran in the primary. Mainly because he's an untested, novice, never held a public office, non-politician. He doesn't understand that you can't just win and then run around and dictate everything. It's not how our system works. To a point it does, but you have to compromise with people on the other side of the aisle in most cases. And when you do that, you find out, oh, I can't get this laundry list of things that I just think I can demand and get. No, Jill Stein's another one. She can promise people the sun, the moons, and the stars and say, oh, it's purist and I'm so holy and I will never, ever do this. And how dare they do this and how dare they do that and these monsters. Well, yeah, you're not running anything. You don't have to deal with people like Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert coming at you, or Kevin McCarthy. You don't have to sit in a governing body with people like that who are outrageous and, waste time on stupid investigations about Hunter Biden. That's what reality is. So anyway, this next one is from Trump's appearance on Gutfeld, and there's a couple clips that went crazy viral from this one. The first one I sort of missed, and I'll admit why I missed it. So Trump had made a statement about how he was the GOAT of debates, or debaters, greatest of all time of debaters, which is lunacy. And he was bragging about how he was this amazing debater. And then he's like, and the audience went wild. They loved it. And, I believe Asen clipped that and it went crazy viral because everybody was like, does he think there was an audience at the debate? Because there wasn't an audience at the debate. I saw that clip too, and I read it as, oh, he's talking about the polls afterward. And the reason why my brain went there is because I watched the post-debate coverage on Fox more than once, because I broke that down for a podcast. So that's my brain immediately jumped to, oh, he's talking about the polls. Like I just made an assumption for him. But I got a clip that nobody else caught, and that's because he'd made a comment that reminded me of a previous scandal. And he'd made a comment about how his followers are so dedicated to him, they make repeat donations. Now, this story is going to kind of answer itself. The second part of this clip is from MSNBC, and it is Stephanie Rule and somebody from her network. Here you go.
We get a lot of money from people. They average $61. Mm-hmm. And those people all vote. Those people, they get, we have some people that'll pay us like $25 a month every single month. They won't miss it. They're very committed.
Shane, this is incredible. At the peak of this, the Trump campaign made up to 3% of all credit card fraud claims in the United States. That is stunning. I realize it's normal for any campaign to refund donations, but this is something totally different. Put it into context for us.
Yeah, so you outlined this pretty well. These boxes that were pre-checked opted donors into giving money over and over again. It started at the beginning of the year as a monthly option, and by the end, it was weekly. And look, if you didn't see this box and you gave those two boxes you showed on screen, if you didn't uncheck both of them, within 30 days of a donation, you would have had 6 donations taken out of your credit card or your bank account, because one is a bonus, the second box, and the first box shows these are weekly withdrawals. And so what happened is people missed these boxes. Look, the online donors tend to be older people, and they missed these boxes. And so after 30 days, they get their credit card bill and they say, wait, what is this? I don't recognize 6 charges to WinRed/Trump campaign or WinRed/ one of the Trump campaign's joint committees with the Republican National Committee. And they called their credit cards and they said, hey, these are fraudulent charges. Now, in general, WinRed gave people back their money pretty quickly if they asked for it. But it still speaks to the incredible volume of people who felt deceived that this many calls were coming into credit card companies. I spoke with multiple people at multiple financial institutions who are on the front lines of getting these calls. And they described being bombarded, that this was an overwhelming volume of things that came out of nowhere around the election, that folks were saying, hey, I intended to give money to President Trump, but I didn't intend to give this much or this many times.
Now, I didn't have time or space to play the full segment. It is longer, and they go into more depth about how Trump supporters weirdly defended the former president, because a lot of them were like, I can't see him doing this to me. It must have been that company, WinRed, that scammed me. And you also, if you want to look deeper into this story, I know it's already been reported on, but if you want to revisit it, the New York Times is the paper that sort of discovered this problem first. And they go into great detail about people like in hospice care who were completely ripped off, who found, their bank accounts completely drained. They got their money back, but it's just horribly, horribly unpleasant when you're dealing with something that, you've got a family member who's dying, who, gave a $50 donation to Trump and ends up with no money whatsoever in their bank account. It's terrifying. Because they're not going to be checking it because they're in hospice care, that kind of thing. Just horrible, horrible. So Trump gets involved in so many scandals that it's easy to memory hole any number of them. The former president weaves a swirling hurricane of hyperbolic statements, outrageous lies, and slander. According to an investigation by the New York Times at the end of his presidency during the 2020 election, the Trump 2020 campaign, working with a for-profit company, WinRed, used tactics that duped donors into making repeated donations without their knowledge. In order to opt out, a contributor would have to navigate a fine print disclaimer and manually uncheck a box. A small donation could quickly balloon and drain bank accounts or max out credit cards. In the last 2 months of the 2020 election cycle, the Trump campaign issued 530,000 refunds worth $64.3 million. In comparison, Joe Biden's campaign refunded 37,000 donations totaling $5.6 million during the same time frame. When all of the refunds were totaled, Trump's campaign was forced to refund $122.7 million, or 11% of the total amount raised. Even after all of this, Trump continued to bilk his supporters by claiming he needed the money to protect our elections because the 2020 election was stolen from him, which he still does to this day. He still does that to this day, and he had this, fund for election protection when he was just stealing the money. Well, technically not stealing the money, but using the money for other things. And that's also been exposed. So I should take this time, because I'm about to switch to another topic, to give a shout out to my sponsor. Now, I listen to podcasts all the time, and I hear commercials for expensive skincare, a lot of things that you mix into water and drink, a lot of supplements, mattresses, sheets, stuff I can't afford. I really can basically afford nothing that I hear on podcast commercials. Sometimes I look it up and go, wow, that's really expensive for a protein bar. Are you kidding? Wow. That's okay. You're doing well if you can afford that. I'm terrible. I don't have a sponsor because I'm not big enough yet to have sponsors, but one day I might. Anyway, so my sponsors are the listeners of this podcast and the readers of my Substack newsletter. And I also have Patreon supporters. Patreon supporters and paid subscribers get exclusive content every single month. It's usually, I try to do it once a week. Sometimes I don't. Right now, it's a lot of Project 2025 stuff. Anybody who's a paid subscriber gets kind of an exclusive first look at the content, and then I wait a few weeks, and then I make it available to everybody else. But you'll get it first. You also get expanded stuff. So it pays to subscribe. And it's subscription start at $5 a month, the lowest level that Substack allows me to offer. So that's about it. And if you can't afford to become a paid subscriber, you can share the podcast, share the newsletter, give me a good review on whatever podcast platform you listen to, and that's about it. And also share my stuff on social media. All of this helps. And you don't have to sit through a bunch of commercials on Decoding Fox News. I don't begrudge anybody who does them because I understand they got to pay their bills. But yeah, you don't have to on this one because I don't have them. I also have no large sponsor. I don't have rich parents. I don't have any of this trappings that people might assume I have. Trust me, I've been accused of all of them. Been accused of getting Soros money. I've been accused of having... The funniest are the wealthy dad ones because I'm like, my dad, the auto mechanic? Yeah, sure. Okay, buddy. He was union. Like, how much do you think he made? Give me a break. He was an hourly wage employee his entire career. So moving on, we're going to go on to Ingram, the Great Haitian Invasion. Now, this is dark. So J.D. Vance started this ridiculous false story in Springfield, Ohio, about Haitian migrants capturing people's dogs and cats and eating them. It's hideous. Trump is expanding this Haitian invasion fear. So there's a small town in Pennsylvania called Shercholi, Pennsylvania. I might be mispronouncing that. I looked it up. Apparently, I've heard from people on the internet that the way Laura Ingraham says it, she's completely butchering the name of this town. It starts with Shar, the Shar sound. Anyway, according to the internet, it does. I don't know. I'm trying my best here. But she brings up this small town because Trump brought it up during a rally in Tucson, Arizona. And the small town is sort of like Springfield, Ohio, in that there's been a large influx of Haitian immigrants into this area. And here you go.
Take Charleroi, Pennsylvania. It's nestled in the far southwestern part of the state. Now, it's a town of only about 4,200 or so residents, 95% white. It's overwhelmingly Republican. Now its budget is buckling, though, under the weight of a huge number of Haitian migrants. According to CBS News, the majority of students in the local school district who need assistance learning English are from Haiti. The district has spent $400,000 in ELL teachers and an interpreter.
So I just looked it up again, and according to Wikipedia for the town, it's pronounced Charleroi. If I'm wrong, my apologies. This one was tough. Okay, so I looked into some local papers for this one because I figured they would have the most accurate information. So this first one is from the Philadelphia Inquirer. They did the reporting on this. They spoke to Charleroi Area School District Superintendent Ed Zelch. He said a couple of hundred immigrant students moving into the school district are not necessarily costing taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars, as Trump claimed. The district, Zelch said, gets reimbursed by the state. As enrollment increases, so does reimbursement and funding from the State Department of Education. And according to reporting by the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Charleroi Borough Manager Joe Manning told KDKA Radio that the claims Trump and his running mate, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, have made were completely false. It's a very negative connotation for reality that just doesn't exist, he said. They're not a drain on resources. They don't cause problems. It's nothing at all like what has been portrayed by the former president. Now, I want to point out also that these are legal immigrants, so they'd have no problem getting a job in the same way that an undocumented immigrant will face hurdles trying to find legal employment in the United States because they technically can't. When you have papers, when you are here legally, it's easier to find employment. These people, that means they are working, they are paying taxes, they're also contributing to these small areas. And I can't get too much into it because we don't have a ton of time, but from what I researched, a lot of people in these small communities said, well, this community was dying. People were moving out. We weren't growing. All of a sudden, we get this influx of immigrants. They're working. They've taken, boarded up storefronts and they've turned them into stores. They're, active in the community. They're, they just want to work. They just want to be, they're escaping a terrible, terrible situation in Haiti. I'd also like to argue very quickly that even undocumented immigrants, when they come to the United States, they might have a difficult time finding work at first or keeping work because they're not legal. And they're doing their best, but they work. Even those people, even those folks, when they have a job, they're going to start spending that income, either rent, food, whatever recreation they're doing, gas, whatever they're doing. They're going to start spending that income, and they spend it in local communities. They're certainly not, you're an undocumented immigrant making, some meager wage. You're certainly not offshoring that income, in the Cayman Islands to avoid taxes. No, you're spending it, probably most of it, in that local community, which helps that local community. So you're a grocery store owner, somebody comes in, buys groceries, that helps you. You don't care if that person's undocumented or not, as long as they're spending money and they're, part of the community. So the Haitians have a bit of an advantage in that they're here legally, so that helps. But anyway, this next clip is from Fox and Friends. This was a jaw dropper because I just went, wow, that's bad. This is from Friday. This is Lawrence Jones, and he's weighing in on the controversy of Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio. Here's that clip.
There has been an attempt to racialize this story, and it's missing the larger point. And it doesn't go well. I know everyone wants to play the soundbite from the debate, but it misses the larger point of what's happening in Springfield. And honestly, it's not just Springfield. It's cities all across the country, many minority neighborhoods that are experiencing this as well, where people are coming in illegally into the country, taking over their communities and their community services when they're already struggling. And so I think the media, so often when Donald Trump says something, or J.D. Vance, they go after the bouncy ball. But they miss the larger story, which is there are a lot of American cities that are already struggling, that are being burdened by the illegal immigration in this country. And there's a lot of people that don't know how to speak English, and they're going into schools, and their kids are having to deal with are already large classroom size. They don't have the staff. Law enforcement is strained. You got gangs taking over apartment complexes, battling with the gangs that are already in other communities. So there's a huge problem, not just in Springfield, Ainsley, but all over this country right now.
So did you see what he did there? He took this tiny kernel of, I'm going to make an assumption that race does not play a role in a nearly all-white community, seeing an influx of Black Haitian immigrants. I think you're assuming a lot there. And then he snowballs it to make it about this big grand scheme of how, migrants all over the country are invading communities and destroying them. A lot of assuming going on. I would respect Lawrence Jones had he gone to Springfield, Ohio, taken his microphone, and let's talk to some Haitian immigrants, shall we? Bring an interpreter if you have to. Let's talk to them, not just to the white aggrieved people in a diner, because that's who he usually talks to. They go to suburban diners. These people are not impoverished. They're doing well. They're old white people for the most part. They get up at 4 a.m. to go talk to Fox News. And they're Trump supporters. That's who he normally talks to. So I'm sorry, I don't think you have enough information to make these assumptions, Lawrence Jones. I think you need to go and actually speak to Haitians and get their side of it. Why not? That would be great. That's why I called him on that, because I went, what are you saying? No racial element. You're saying that there's no racial element in the United States, a country with a long history of problems with race relations due to our horrible history of genocide and enslavement, which you cannot just erase because you feel like you don't want to talk about it. No, we've had a problem with this for generations. We have to be honest and open about it. And I get why people don't want to talk about it. They want to move forward. Yes, great. But we still have a problem. And you're talking about people who don't even speak English, who have a different culture, coming to some small town. Of course they're going to have a hard time. Some people are going to give them a hard time. Yes. And if they looked like me and they spoke Swedish, I don't think they'd face the same grief. I honestly don't. Another thing Jones did there is he's combining the Haitian immigrants who are here legally with undocumented immigrants. So no, you can't do that. These are people that were legally allowed to either come to the United States or stay in the United States because Haiti is falling apart. Haiti is got problems. That poor beleaguered nation has had problems since it was formed, and we'll get into that in a minute. But so they are legally allowed to come here. They didn't break any laws. They didn't cross the border illegally. So what are you doing? Just combining them all of these outsiders are all bad. No. So here we go. Jones seemed to miss the point that the Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Illinois, are in the United States on temporary protected status. As part of this program, qualifying individuals are allowed to stay in the U.S. because conditions in their home countries are considered unsafe. He's also making an assumption that racism does not play a role in the harassment the Haitian community is facing in Springfield. Jones is entitled to his opinion, of course, but he hasn't visited Springfield or interviewed any Haitian immigrants who live there. It's also a bit presumptuous for Jones to declare that Haitian immigrants of African descent would not face any racism in a town that is 70% white, in a country that has a long history grappling with racial tensions and discrimination. Since Senator J.D. Vance and Trump have made their unfounded accusations about Haitians in Springfield, more than 30 bomb threats have been made against government buildings, schools, and city's officials' homes since last week, forcing evacuations and closures. The myth that Haitian immigrants might eat their neighbors' pets isn't even coming from thin air. Earlier this year, Elon Musk, the owner of X, formerly known as Twitter, and others promoted false stories about cannibalistic Haitian gangs. According to reporting by NBC News, at the time these unfounded rumors were flying on social media, the State Department, Doctors Without Borders, and Human Rights Watch said they saw no evidence of cannibalism in the country. False claims about the brutality of Haitians go back as far as the Haitian revolutions in 1804, when slaves successfully revolted against French colonizers. Now, if you want to read an exciting story, brace yourself, sit down, get a nice beverage, and watch videos. I love these, like the ones that are meant for educational purposes. I love them. I can watch one right after the other. On the history of the Haitian revolutions. Mind-blowing. You had slaves who had nothing, absolutely nothing. Many cases were not formally educated. Figure out how to topple, at the time, a world power. And one of the elements to this story that's just like, wow, mind-blowing, is that the descendants of people who were born of slaves and French colonizers, basically the slave owners would rape slaves, because slaves couldn't really consent, could they? However you want to call that. They would have children with these women. The children grew up, and there was this whole community of people in Haiti that were of mixed ethnicity. Those people who were treated a little bit better than slaves because they looked more European, joined with the slaves for the most part. So the offspring, that part of the story is just even more like, wow. And these people with nothing successfully got rid of this horrific trade of slavery on this tiny island community. They toppled this empire. And France punished Haiti by forcing them to repay France for the loss of its colony. And this went on for generation after generation after generation, which crippled this tiny little country. And it was right after the United States became free, Haiti was next. And Haiti has suffered and suffered and suffered. It also has the misfortune of being in an area where there's a lot of natural disasters, such as hurricanes and earthquakes. That's not Haiti's fault. That's not the people of Haiti's fault. It's a tremendous history. I highly recommend reading about it. It will make you view that country very differently, in my humble opinion. I've said this before in a previous podcast, I lived in a neighborhood called Flatbush, Brooklyn, which had a very large Jamaican and Haitian community, and I have no idea why people are demonizing Haitian people. I've never had a single bad experience. Most of what I remember about my Haitian neighbors is that they had lovely accents because of the dialect of French that they speak. Creole is gorgeous when you hear people speak it. And they were just like a lot of church ladies. That's what I remember. Just they get all dressed up to go to church. So next up, we have the Fed cut interest rates and everything is terrible. This is a doozy. This is from Fox and Friends on Friday. And yes, the Fed cut interest rates. Here we go.
Employment starting the year at 3.7%, now creeping up to 4.2% in August. And the chairman of the Federal Reserve says one factor is the crisis at our southern border.
If you're having millions of people come into the labor force then, and you're creating 100,000 jobs, you're going to see unemployment go up. We understand there's been quite an influx across the borders, and that has actually been one of the things that's allowed unemployment rate to rise.
Joining us now is co-host of the Big Money Show on Fox Business, Jackie DeAngelis. Good to see you,
Good
Jackie.
morning.
So why do you think he said that? I mean, he's basically admitting because our southern border is open, they're taking jobs from Americans.
This was so interesting that he added it in there. Let me start by saying, Ainsley, I think he cut rates by 0.5 point because the economy is in worse shape than most people understand. I think he has access to data points that we don't necessarily see, and he's threading a needle and saying, I needed to cut not 25, but 50, and I needed to do it now.
So I'm going to tackle what she just said there in a moment, but here's a couple of statements by Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve.
The unemployment rate has moved up, but remains low at 4.2%. Nominal wage growth has eased over the past year, and the jobs to workers gap has narrowed. Overall, a broad set of indicators suggest that conditions in the labor market are now less tight than just before the pandemic in 2019. The labor market is not a source of elevated inflationary pressures. The median projection for the unemployment rate in the SEP is 4.4% at the end of this year, 0.4 higher than projected in June. Inflation has eased notably over the past 2 years, but remains above our longer run goal of 2%. We know, if you go back, we know that the policy stance we adopted in July of 2023 came at a time when unemployment was 3.5% and inflation was 4.2%. Today, unemployment is up to 4.2%. Inflation's down to a few tenths above 2. So we know that it is time to recalibrate our policy to something that is more appropriate.
The simplest way I can put this, and some people might take umbrage with this, economics is such a crazy science because it's kind of like meteorology, is that you're kind of guessing and you're not always right. Nobody's ever always right. Nobody in economics is always right because the economy is a bit unpredictable. But it's the kind of thing where when the economy gets too hot and prices go up too much, the Fed tries to slow it down by raising interest rates. So it makes it harder and more expensive to borrow money, and that tends to slow things down, which is what the Fed wanted. So when the Fed started to see that unemployment started to rise, in the Fed's mind, that's a good thing. That's what they wanted. They don't want unemployment to keep dropping because that could cause wages to keep going up, which is inflationary, which he just said it wasn't. And he just said also that the current rate of unemployment is still incredibly low, which it is. So it's difficult, it's tricky, but that's why I included his statement there. So I just want to address what that DeAngelis woman said. She's from the Big Money Show that's on Fox Business. So what data points is she talking about? How is the economy in worse shape? She didn't provide any specifics or give further context. Now, I studied business journalism in grad school, and there is an entire industry dedicated to monitoring and analyzing every single aspect of the U.S. economy, from unemployment, housing, inflation, consumer prices, trade, government consumption, the stock market, value of U.S. currency, construction spending, and retail sales, to name a few. I studied American manufacturing. DeAngelis implied that Powell somehow had access to secret information that he wasn't sharing, yet she couldn't back up a single syllable of her statement. She couldn't. That was just absolute nonsense. The idea that there is secret information that exists that only Powell can see and not share is conspiratorial and fantastical. The Federal Reserve is not part of the intelligence community. Billionaire investors all over the world watch every single aspect of the U.S. economy and make bets on stocks, treasuries, currencies, and commodities accordingly. As overwhelming as financial markets seem, they are remarkably transparent. And I'm standing by what I just said. I dare you, when you start to deep dive in it, you can look anything up. If you want to look it up, you can look it up. And I'm telling you, there's like thousands of people that their entire lives, from the morning they get up to go to work to the time they click out for work, and then they probably think about it on the weekends, they obsess about every single crazy aspect of our economy. They do. When you study economics, you find this out. Even the cursory amount of economics I've studied, you find this out. Everything is analyzed. Everything. Inventory is analyzed. Back orders are analyzed. It's unbelievable what they go through. How long it takes a shipping container to go from China to the United States, and the cost of which that specific shipping container, someone is tracking that and keeping exact notes of it. There are spreadsheets for everything I just said. I'm not kidding. That's why I'm like, when you say that there's secret information, what are you talking about? Anyway, so yeah, completely nuts. So that's about it. We're going to move on to stories Fox News ignored every week. I compare the hours I've watched on Fox News to 5 hours of the PBS NewsHour. The following are a list of the top stories PBS covered that Fox News did not. I had to cut this one down again. Here we go, starting with, this one's the most important category, I think, climate disasters. The Czech Republic, Poland, Romania, Austria, Hungary, and parts of northern Italy have experienced catastrophic flooding due to heavy rains that so far have claimed the lives of at least 24 people, while causing billions of dollars in property damage. Thousands have been evacuated from the worst-hit regions. Thousands attended the funeral of 3 firefighters who were killed battling wildfires in Portugal. At least 5 have died as authorities are still assessing the total size of the burned area. Most experts think the fires have been exacerbated by human-made climate change and a decline in traditional farming techniques that helped clear underbrush. Officials in Zimbabwe and Namibia have ordered a culling of hundreds of wild elephants in order to feed needy communities that have faced hunger due to droughts in the area. The elephants are to be taken from an area where they have become unsustainable. Hwange National Park is currently home to 45,000 elephants, but due to rising temperatures and drought conditions, can only sustain 15,000. At least 1,000 have died and millions have been displaced or disrupted due to flooding in Nigeria, an area that was drought-stricken but has been overcome with excessive rain. West and Central Africa has been hit hard by excessive rains, with most governments having scant resources to cope with the disaster. On to the rest of the news. A pipeline fire in the Houston suburbs burned for 4 days before it was finally put out after forcing residents to evacuate and melting surrounding cars. Authorities in the area have launched a criminal investigation into the cause of the blaze. Houston lacks zoning guidelines that normally would prohibit a potentially dangerous pipeline in a residential area. The Federal Trade Commission, FTC, filed a lawsuit against pharmacy benefit managers, PBMs, over the high cost of insulin. PBMs act as a middleman in the pharmaceutical industry between patients and drug companies. The agency said that the companies create a perverse drug rebate system that artificially inflates the cost of insulin. Boeing will freeze hiring and furlough existing employees due to an ongoing labor strike at the troubled company. Donald J. Trump preemptively blamed Jewish Americans for his possible loss in the presidential election. During the annual summit of the Conservative Israeli American Council, Trump said, "If I don't win this election, the Jewish people would really have a lot to do with that if that happens, because at 40%, that means 60% of the people are voting for the enemy." The event that he said this at was meant to address anti-Semitism. Unbelievable. A group of U.S. lawmakers came together in a show of bipartisan support to call for the release of Hong Kong businessman Jimmy Lai. Lai, who owned the newspaper Apple Daily, is one of hundreds of democracy activists, journalists, and political leaders imprisoned as part of mainland China's ongoing crackdown on dissent in Hong Kong. A Hong Kong court sentenced the first 2 people under its new national security law. One man received 14 months in prison for wearing a T-shirt with a protest slogan. A second man received 10 months for writing pro-independent messages on the back of bus seats. Senate Republicans rejected a bill that would have protected access to IVF treatments. According to an investigation by ProPublica, 2 women have died in Georgia due to the state's extreme bans on abortion. One of those women, Amber Nicole Thurman, died from an infection after a hospital waited too long to perform a dilation and curettage, or DNC, after she suffered rare complications from taking abortion medication. The procedure is effectively banned in Georgia, with few exceptions. The Department of Justice filed a $100 million lawsuit against the cargo company that owned the ship that caused the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse in Baltimore, Maryland. 4 black women who worked on the space program received the Congressional Gold Medal. The women were featured in the non-fiction book Hidden Figures: The American Dream and the Untold Story of the Black Women Who Helped Win the Space Race by Margaret Lee Shetterly. The book was adapted to film in 2017. The women faced discrimination even as their prowess in math and science helped build the foundations of the space program. Microsoft warned of synchronized Russian interference in the upcoming presidential election targeting the Harris-Walz campaign. A new report from the company's Threat Analysis Center identified 2 groups aligned with the Kremlin that are actively creating content to discredit and smear the Harris-Walz campaign. And those are all the stories that if you were Judge Jeanine, you would know about because you work for Fox. I kind of forgot to do an impression, so I just threw one in there. Little mini one. Odin is on the desk, ladies and gentlemen. He's done. He wants me to finish this, wrap this up. Don't worry, we're almost done, sweetie. Okay, top 5 topics. Odin is my cat. One of my cats. Top 5 topics from the week. I compare Fox to PBS every single week. Here we go. We're starting with Fox. Number 1, second Trump assassination attempt at 29%. Trump 2024, which is where they blatantly promote him as a candidate, 23%. Kamala bashing, where they trash Kamala Harris, 21%. 4% to the border crisis, and 4% to the P. Diddy arrest. On PBS, number 1 topic, deep sea mining. That was a whole series. They did several episodes. It was kind of evergreen, which is why I didn't include it in the list, because it wasn't really topical. It's something they've been working on for a long time. It's about rare earth minerals. 11% author profile. That's people talking about their books. 11% Israel-Hamas war. 11% the presidential campaign. 6%. And the second Trump assassination attempt. 6%. So the words used on Fox for the week ending September 22nd, 2024. Trump, 598. Kamala, 197. Biden, 117. So it was a huge, stark difference between those 3 right there. Poll, 87. Assassination, 86. Border, 71. The word kill is in they tried to kill Trump. That was 59. Israel, 55. Crime, 44. Inflation, 27. China, 11. Hunter, 3. AOC, 3. And that's the end of the podcast. If you'd like to check my work, you can find me at X, formerly known as Twitter, Threads.
Since I am in the middle of a battle, I can't just turn off the podcast, but let me tell you, I am very thankful that she clarified that Odin is her cat. That is a fact I knew, that I just did not realize that it could potentially come up in that context and possibly confuse people that I was somehow on her lap. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and go through this. So, oh my God. Oh, fuck. Hold on. Try not to die, figuratively and literally. It's okay, Bubba. Now my dog's getting worried about me. That's good. Usually when I cough, he just goes in the other room. So it's good that he, like, I think he can, oh no. He did just go to the other room. So if I ever end up choking on something, he will not do anything to save me. He will just cower away because he doesn't like it. And I lost my train of thought there. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. If the beginning of the podcast and my gameplay showed anything, it's just how very confusing the whole Cyrodiil Imperial City mapping system still is, and I'm sure will continue to be. I was working for quite some time on getting enough of those tickets to get that day timer sort of thing for houses. I'm really hoping that I didn't spend 1,000 of those tickets for just one of those. I'm hoping it's one of those things that I can put in each house, because that is a ridiculous amount of money to spend on something you only get one of, especially for such like it's a pretty amazing item. Like, I tried to show it off there. There are a few houses that I decorate that just look absolutely more better at nighttime. What am I doing? Group, sorry. Chewing gum, skipping down the road, and whistling. Can't do it at the same time. So that is going to be our little spiel for today. Hope you enjoyed it, and as always, good luck, America.